Hey, welcome to Korean Cinegeek. Today I'm releasing the first part of a two-part video on the movie Masquerade. Now I have three reasons why I think Masquerade is a great film, but before we get into that, I guess we're getting into it now.
Aigoo! Nan-en-tool-ah-wa-tah. Hello! Oh, I said Moo-sun-yi-dee-yah. We know Korean movies are delectable. I guzzle soju while I watch them till my belly is full like a berserk. For Korean cinema, not those films from California or Albania. My goal is to build a community of Korean movie lovers, but especially everyone who's never seen Korean flicks. When they see them, it'll hit them like a ton of bricks. Like better in the Himalayas, English shadows that can speak the world of us. Let's get it going! I also like Oldboy. Subscribe! Hit that button at the end of the arrow.
Masquerade is a Korean historical film that takes place in the 15th century during the Joseon dynasty. That's Joseon dynasty. Google it. It stars Lee Byung-hun as a paranoid king, he's the one on the right, who hires a double, also played by Lee, the one to the left. The real king wants the double to act as the king in the evening hours in the inner chamber of the palace, because the king suspects that someone's trying to poison him. Turns out his suspicion is correct, but the king's on his deathbed, and that means the double has to go out to speak to the real court and try to pretend around the country before the king recovers, and there's no guarantee that that will happen. Masquerade received critical acclaim around the world. At the 2013 Grand Bell Awards, the Korean equivalent of the Academy Awards, Masquerade took home 15 trophies, including Best Picture, Actor, Supporting Actor, and Screenplay. Now, the most an American film has ever won at the Oscars is 14 trophies. So, speaking strictly by the numbers, Masquerade sunk the Titanic. I left this shot here because it is gorgeous and indicative of the entire movie and the Korean film industry. Look at the attention to detail for the lighting and costumes and the period detail. It speaks volumes. That visual tells you everything about the king. Now, let's get to the three reasons I believe Masquerade is not a Korean masterpiece, but a masterpiece, period. Oh, I didn't know this was going to look like a PowerPoint presentation.
언니는 미간이 넓어본 게 형제복이 많아.
아, 무남 동년대.
그러니까 언니 보고 욕심쟁이라고 그러는 거야. 그 지금 만나고 있는 그 남자는 헤어져. 그 새끼랑 헤어져야 돼, 언니.
저 남자친구 없어요.
When I started out as a screenwriter, I learned about arcs. And not just character arcs, but relationship arcs. Because it's not just how the character changes over time. It's if he brings other people along with him to change. Now that second half doesn't really happen in movies very often, maybe once or twice. Now I'm going to show you three of them that happen between the double and three different characters, and how they each change each other in the beginning to the end. Chief Counselor, Personal Guard, and Food Taster. Let's check out the Chief Counselor first. Now, when the Chief Counselor first meets the double, you can see that he treats him like he's an insect, and he's looking him over like he's looking over a piece of meat. And when the double gets hurt, as he does, he gets hit by those beams, not once but twice. You can see that the chief doesn't care a whit about what happens to him. When they get to the court, the king and the chief counselor really don't get along. In fact, the chief counselor treats him like a dog. But that leads to some very slapsticky moments. And it shows when they forget where they're supposed to be sitting when the king is greeting people in his chambers. And that leads to an even funnier moment later in the movie when they are sitting in the right place and someone comes in to enter. When the double has to take the place of the real king in the royal palace and address his court, the chief counselor takes him for some practice, but he's not expecting much. However, when the chief counselor gives him instructions, the double does something and takes the notes, and as you can see visually, something in the chief counselor changes. And it's either changing his view of the double or changing his worldview. Why do I say worldview? There's a minor spoiler alert coming up, and it's right now. The chief counselor offers the double something near the end of the film that would be unimaginable at the beginning of the film.
내 이제껏 비루하게 살아왔지만 지금은 아니요. 하면 진짜 왕이 되시던가. 백성의 고열을 빠는 저들을 용서치 못하겠다면 백성을 하늘처럼 섬기는 왕, 진정 그것이 그대가 꿈꾸는 왕이라면 그 꿈 내가 이루어드리리다.
Did the double accept the chief's offer? We'll find out in a minute, but it does end as... Okay, hang on. Let's get to the second arc, the guard. Now, the relationship between the guard and the double obviously begins on a sour note, as it does with all his relationships. The personal guard is searching for the double for the real king, and the guard discovers the man who's going to be the double. Now, the double is in a courtesan's house, mocking the king, playing his part, getting people to laugh. And when he draws that sword, it's clear that starting your relationship with wanting to kill them isn't so good. As the movie progresses, the king's guard becomes more and more suspicious that the king is not the king, but the double. And this right here is what seals it for him. This movement, which he remembers from the courtesan's house. The guard boldly approaches the bridge where the king and queen are talking and...
이 무슨 짓인가?
이자는 전하가 아니옵니다. 네놈이 도승지를 속이고 상선을 속였을지 몰라도 내 눈을 속일 수는 없다.
옥체에 거물겨는 죄가 무엇인지 모르는 것이냐?
마마, 이자가 진짜라면 신이 이 자리에서 칼을 물 것이옵니다.
중전인 내가 전하를 못 알아볼까 싶은가?
The queen does convince the guard that the king is the real king. Now, it may not make sense now, but in the next video I'll tell you about it and it'll make lots of sense. But anyway, the king takes the sword from the double and goes back to the court. But later, he summons the guard outside to ask him a question.
너의 불충이 무엇인가 말해보거라.
주상 전하의 옥체에 검을 들이댄 죄.
틀렸다.
감히 전하를 의심하여.
틀렸다. 목숨을 걸고 임금을 지켜야 할 호위관이 지 마음대로 죽겠다고 칼을 물다니. 내 목에 칼을 들이댄 거야 10번이라도 상관없다. 네 놈이 살아야 내가 사는 것. 네 목숨이 얼마나 중요한지 모르는 것이냐. 이 칼은 나.
The fact that the king not only spared the life of the guard, but gives him back his sword, changes the guard's opinion of the king, the double, forever. You look at him. That would change me, too. But let's not forget that the double follows the letter of the court law. He is very devoted, not only to the king, but the palace and the laws inside of it. So we don't know what he's going to do. In fact, when the king, the double, goes in disguise, it's like Joseon-deception. Christopher Nolan reference that I messed up. When he goes for a walk in the woods in disguise, the guard has to go with him. But the double doesn't know that the guard has been given orders to assassinate who they think is the king.
멈춰라. 가거라. 길이 끝나면 보고가 나올 것이다. 가거라. 어서. 돌아보지 말고 가란 말이다.
That still gives me goosebumps, but not as much as the actual end of the guard's arc. Yeah, that's right, I'm not going to show you that yet either, mainly because I want to get to this third arc, which I'll show from beginning to end, because I believe this is the heart of the movie. It takes place between the double, the king, and the food taster. Now this actress is Shim Yeon-kyung. She is, words can't describe how wonderful she is and how excited I am at her future because she is 24. Let's get to their relationship. The relationship actually begins with the real king and the food taster. So the real king, of course, is paranoid about poison. So he wants, obviously, his food taster to taste his porridge before he eats it. The food taster doesn't do her job because she's so afraid of dying, thanks to the king's paranoia, that she won't do it. She's lucky she didn't get killed. As the movie goes forward, it's now the double who meets the food taster for the first time. And the food taster brings the king something that she thinks he'll really like.
이 팥죽 누가 만들었느냐?
저기 있는 김이나인이 수락관 상궁에게 부탁한 줄 아옵니다.
맞나구나. 어릴 적 먹던 그 맛이구나. 그래, 이름이 무엇냐?
예, 전하. 4월이라 하옵니다.
The double is fascinated by Sawal, the food taster, because she seems to care so much for the king, even though she doesn't know him, not to mention the fact that she is a lowly servant. In fact, he is so enamored by her and so curious that he brings her to his chambers to find out why she is just a servant.
비탄 없이 대답해 보거라.
산골 소장농이었사옵니다. 그런데 어느 날부터 관아에서 세금으로
This is the first time that we see the double, the king, see how the lower class is treated by the upper class inside the palace, which is indicative of how it is in the entire country. And you can see that the double, even though he has lived in the world, he has lived a sheltered life as well, hanging out with rich people, hanging out in courtesans' houses, having a good time, rabble-rousing. Now he's coming face to face with reality. And it shows.
얘 이런 족같은 전하.
The double is moved so much that he does something that surprises the chief counselor and pretty much anyone in the audience.
받아라. 이제 나한텐 필요 없는 것이니 넣어두거라.
The money he's handing her is the money he was paid to play the double. So he is now giving away everything he even did this job for. But as with any kind of palace intrigue in film and in life, there are always going to be forces that conspire against someone who is good.
사월아, 계피 사탕이다. 입에 물고 있다가 팥죽에 넣거라.
마마님, 사탕 안에 든 것이 무엇이옵니까?
나도 모른다. 내가 아는 건 사탕을 팥죽에 넣지 않으면 너나 나나 죽은 목숨이라는 것뿐이다.
Just as the guard follows palace law and court law because that's all he knows, she follows palace law and court law because that's all that she knows. And don't forget, she doesn't know that he is a quote-unquote false king. Okay? So she has a decision to make because she is not supposed to disobey those above her. Now here is a spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Like Beetlejuice, I told you 3 times. But I'm telling you, I have left out large swaths of this movie. I'm like, there's a queen, there is an inquisition, there's all kinds of things that I've made sure to avoid to make your enjoyment of this movie fantastic. Do I say that word too much? Here's the scene between the food taster and the double when he has his porridge.
어찌 우느냐, 사와라.
전하, 부디 감량하시옵소서.
That, you know, when I'm making these videos, I have to watch the movie a dozen times or more to get it down. And watching that last scene is just, I'm trying to keep it together right now. But I want you to remember how that arc began. Now, of course, it wasn't with the double, it was with the king. However, King looked angry. The food taster was scared and upset. She thought she was going to die, and she did not do for the king what she was meant to do, what she was ordered to do, which is to be the food taster. And it ends up with her sacrificing herself for the king, who she doesn't know is the double, but she does know he's changed. And you notice that she says, "Long live the king." Some translations have it, "Long live my king." I do like that better. Speaking of "Long live my king," let's get back to the guard's arc. We see a hit squad come toward the guard because the hit squad is supposed to back up the guard in case there's a problem killing the king / double. And then
용상을 해하려거든. 나를 먼저 배워. 임금이 아니란 말이요. 그대에게는 가짜일지 모르나. 나에게는 진짜다.
So we have two characters that started off either upset or wanted to kill the guy, and it ends with them both sacrificing themselves for a commoner who they now think is their real king. Long live my king, long live the king. Which leads us to the chief counselor. Does he kill himself? No. But this is probably the most powerful moment that you can have in a movie. I'm going to talk over this a little bit because it's all visual. So the double, he is getting on a boat, which he caught on the port, thanks to the guard. And then the double notices someone has come to see him off. This port is very far away. Let's just watch. If you don't know why the chief counselor bowing to the double is probably the biggest deal ever, you really, really need to do yourself a favor and go Google the Joseon dynasty, because it is a fascinating, wonderful, I can't think of the adjectives. I use fascinating a lot because you know what? I am fascinated. I'm learning new stuff every day. And so when you learn about court etiquette, I really would read up on some articles. But right now, we've come to the end of the first part of this video. In part 2, I'm going to cover reasons 2 and 3 Masquerade is unparalleled with any modern major motion picture in America when it comes to non-superhero films. And I'm not going to say anything about superhero films. Now, the second reason will be visual cues. It's going to be fun. And the third reason is, it's too special for me to get into now. And you probably wouldn't understand it, but when I put it in context, you are going to love it. So until then, 감사합니다.
If you love Korean film, then you come to the right place. I'm Korean City Geek and I get in your face about movies. Subscribe.